thrilled to be able to have this conversation tonight. We create content and communications that impact people, that inspire people, that transform people, that reach people, and reach through the chaos and the noise and the confusion that we are experiencing in the world of media and social media. You know, Mark Allan Kaplan has been such an inspiration to me as somebody who deeply understands the intricacies of how media, not just, when I say media, I don't mean just news, I mean media, pictures, movies, stories, impact us, not just in terms of like, gee, it makes me happy, it makes me sad, but on a cellular soul level. And so he and I and Jonathan Steigman has started this conversation recently, and we thought we've really got to break out and have this conversation. And so I'm joined by them and also two other favorite amazing people who we're going to talk about in a second. But this is a rough time. And I know from my own self that I sometimes can't even read a news. I don't even watch the news. I don't read newspapers. I'm afraid to even like read anything because I don't even know how to make sense of it anymore. I don't even know how to determine truth and fact because it's all just up in the air. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. So my guest, just to give you a little background, Mark Allan Kaplan, you are like a captain, Mark. Mark Allan Kaplan, PhD, is an independent award-winning filmmaker and the preeminent theorist and practitioner of the application of evolutionary meta theories to moving image media. Wow. Jonathan Steigman is a Bay Area activist, filmmaker, magician. Oh, how fun. Communications consultant and independent researcher. Anahita Paragon, I hope I got that right, close enough, she'll correct me in a minute, is a visionary strategist, entrepreneur, organizer, somatic, traumatic therapist, and plant medicine expert. And some of her recent creations include Project One Voice, and Sanity Sanctuary and Plant Remedy. And Project One Voice and Sanity Sanctuary are two groups that I belong to, and how she and I found each other because I really appreciated the way in which she was approaching communication. So we're going to talk with her. And Mark DiNicola, who is a social media strategist that since 2010 has helped clients meet and exceed their online goals, including helping a number of films hit the #1 spot on the US iTunes documentary sales chart. And he's going to really help us dig into all things social media and what the heck is going on there, because I sometimes don't even know. So let's start, Mark Allan Kaplan, with, can you sort of give me some context in what you mean when you say media shaman?
Hi, Betsy, and hi, everybody. So the term media shaman, from my perspective, is it's somebody who attempts to use media as medicine, to use it to heal, to help evolve and grow. And one of the keys is, for all shamans, the key is that we heal ourselves and others. We don't just try to heal others. So the shaman is always about that, is this simultaneously healing of self and other and world. And the shaman uses the tools in their environment, in their reality, to help heal and grow. And there's more to it than that, because in order to do that, the media shaman has to work on deepening and expanding their own perceptual field. Now, this is an essential quality of shamans, but it's also an essential quality we find in master artists and even major change makers. By the way, I stutter, so that's what that is. And so these artists and innovators also, and change makers like Martin Luther King and Gandhi, they were approaching what they were doing within a deeper and more expansive perceptual field. They saw things in ways that we normally don't perceive, and were able to affect change at the level of cause, not the level of effect. Because unless we expand and deepen our perceptual field, we're not going to get down to the causal level, especially right now with the environment that we're in. And that requires us to have that more expansive perceptual field, and also the key to be the change. You can't give something you don't have. And that's one of the keys to all shamanism, and to creating the creative work, innovation, and change. And in a way, in the past, we've relied on major people who achieve that and help us through, but in the major transition we're in now, we're called to all do it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was
now
going to say.
On our phones, we're sharing it, we're creating it, we're all now content providers.
Yeah.
Even if we're not creating the original content. So we got to understand it.
And what I like about it's interesting because now we're receiving media, and then we're pushing it out. We're receiving and we're pushing it out. And that what we're talking about, I think tonight, is that moment when you receive, really having conscious awareness of what are your biases, what are your prejudices, what are your fears, what's coming up for you. And then before you hit that send or post or, button, really know, well, am I just spewing that back out again? Am I just continually, is it like a loop, basically? Because if we really are going, so many people say all the time, gosh, I wish we could just get along. Gosh, I wish people, wouldn't be so divisive or wouldn't be so divided. And, Mark, DiNicola, it used to be you bought a newspaper or you sat in front of a TV and some man or woman came on and they read the news, and it was pretty boring. And then it was over and everyone went about their day. Now, everybody literally wakes up in the morning on their phone, social media, what's happening, who's, who's sleeping with who, whose cat's happy, and what's going on in the world, within 5 minutes. It's so insane. And now, you have all this stuff incoming. I mean, it's chaos, but it's having a profound effect on humanity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
For sure. Yeah, it's become so habitual that it's at the point where now, for anyone who's looking to get anyone's attention, it's not a matter of capturing their attention, it's actually fighting to get a glimmer of it. The one impact of social media that it gets on an annual basis is that our attention spans are shrinking by literally the week. Before, we used to think, okay, this really cool video, we'd sit there, watch it on YouTube for a really long period of time. Now it's down to good luck holding someone's attention in a scrolling newsfeed for about 3 seconds. Those opening 3-4 seconds, even when I'm advertising films, are so critical and dictate so much of how well something performs, because we've literally become so habitually through this scroll, whether we're on a computer, whether we're on our phone, that it's literally fighting for our attention. We consume so much so quickly, expect it to be delivered to us in such a visually appealing way just to even stop us or process it beyond the subconscious level, that it's almost overwhelming. And that's why even what you were mentioning before, the whole idea of quickly hitting that share button or kind of doing things almost seemingly unconsciously, just keep spewing things out there, especially now when we're in such a tumultuous time in the world where there's so much information. And it doesn't matter whether you're on the side where you believe everything that the mainstream's saying, or you're on the side where you do not believe anything that the mainstream's saying. We're all guilty of quickly just re-spewing anything we think out there. And all these things are actually tarnishing our legitimacy for other things when it becomes a more important time to actually have active conversations, where it becomes important to really encourage other people's opinions, have healthy conversations stemming around it, because we've been so habitually trained to consume, share, and then get these dopamine hits when people react and react and react. We became addicted to that rather than consciously consuming and making active choices and thinking about what we're doing and making sure it's putting out to the world what we actually want to put out.
Well, and that it's what we really, I mean, for me, I have come to the place where in anything I choose to watch, whether it's a film, you know, one of the things I love that Trina Wyatt, our founder, says is, you know, if we are what we eat, we are what we watch. You know, it's a very same concept. And that really hadn't struck me until she said it one day. And I thought, God, you know, I have to step back and slow down. And once I finally started doing that, I realized I became more consciously aware of what my biases are and what my beliefs are and what I'm more willing to look at because it suits me. It suits my story, right, to go that direction. And so, you know, I've come to the place with all the media that I'm creating that I either have to check in on that and go, okay, am I being objective, or am I have the broadest awareness that I possibly can, or now I don't even share it. I just won't. You know, I won't. I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, you know what? The world does not need one more of this post. And that's just a more conscious choice that I'm making. Jonathan, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to ask Anahita, you know, she started these two platforms, Project One Voice and Sanity Sanctuary, as places, let me know if I get this right, where people can just, you know, go to check in with their own biases and to get some context about what's going on from somebody who's not as emotionally charged. Usually, I love how a lot of your posts are very clean and factual and not a lot of emotion and not a lot of drama. Just like, well, here's the truth, and here's what's being skewed. I mean, it's so clean. Why did you start these pages?
Great question. So we started off as Sanity Sanctuary, and Sanity Sanctuary started as more of a support group for a group of 5 friends. And within a week, we had 100 members, and then it just kept growing from there. We're nearly, I think, at 800 members, and we're a very small private group. We don't invite anyone. It completely organically grew, and we created it as a space because we noticed that there was a lot of noise in the community and a lot of just reactionary exchanges versus really trying to find common ground or hear each other out. And I feel like a lot of us are guilty of that, especially at the beginning of all of this. You know, I personally am that. And at some point we find that what we're doing isn't really working. So how do we hone it in and create a safe space for the community to get together to discuss topics that are charged within an approved and agreed upon set of guidelines, where we say you respect the guidelines, you respect what we call fact hygiene practices. So go through your due diligence, do a step-by-step process. You know, when it comes to the news, we say, consider the source. When you hear something, where is it coming from? Do a little bit of research and due diligence on that. Look to see, you know, the headlines can be very sensationalized. So can you read beyond the headlines and find the whole truth of the articles? Often when you read the whole thing, it's something completely different. And so we got to be really mindful, and there's step-by-step guides and processes and due diligence that we provide, and we talk to our audience about, I mean, in a very gentle way, but we do have a very beautiful set of guidelines that we've set up just to do that and hold all of us to a common set of decency. I think that's really the key, and a set of factual reality, some kind of sources. And we don't all agree. Not everybody is progressive or centrist or right wing. We have people from all walks of life, and we come together with one goal. How do we talk about the news and what's happening and support each other in debunk or prove points of views and narratives that are out there? And hopefully learn in that process how to engage with each other and also engage with people outside of the group that aren't bought into this process and take that process outside and see what we can learn from that. So that was the beginning of Sanity Sanctuary. But within Sanity Sanctuary, we start having a lot of conversations about, okay, these are great space to provide as a safe space, but we're not really doing a whole lot of action. What kind of actions can we take? How can we become part of the solution in an active manner? And that's where Project One Voice completely organically was developed by the members of the group. It's not my creation. It's everyone's creation, all the people that came together and decided to do it. So Project One Voice has one goal, really, to create a very safe space online. So we have a trauma-informed approach. Instead of fighting, we first aim to create a safe space. It's only when we create a safe space can we really have real vulnerable conversations. And when we feel like we're attacked, we actually can't. Everybody gets really worked up and gets in a defensive position, and we don't even pause to listen. Sometimes people will argue and they're arguing the same point from different perspectives.
Yeah, that's true.
It's part of it. So that's really where all of this came into play, is how do we create a trauma-informed perspective that aims to unite, aims to understand and create a safe space, while also providing completely non-emotional, fact-based data points from very valid sources. For example, we won't even source content from mainstream news agencies, which many people consider to be credible. We go all the way to the research papers. We go all the way to any reports that come from the government agencies. So that's kind of the structure that we set up to provide a safe space for conversations, and also take that message out with some commentary, and not commentary, but content that is aiming to just inform and not manipulate. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point, Jonathan. So I want to ask you about media shamanism, because, you know, I love the word that you chose, shaman, because I mean, a shaman typically has no, I mean, very few people I believe are neutral. And I'm not even sure neutral's the right word. It feels like it. But when you almost, if your desire is to create peace and unity and connection and a deeper connection, a shaman has to sort of be stepped out of it. Is that possible? Is that possible when you're creating media and when you're either filmmaking or even just writing posts? Can we do that as individuals?
Well, one of the things we like to say is that the shaman is the person who lives at the edge of the village. So he's not in the village. He's of the village, but also of the jungle or of the forest. So the media shaman is somebody who can step outside of all of the different boxes and see, this person's in this box, this person's in this box. They may both have validity, but only in some domains, not necessarily in all domains. And one of the things we talk about, we just put out this Media Shaman Toolkit, which available now on CGood TV.
The link is in the comments, by the way.
One of the reasons we did that was to also talk about the meta theories, as Mark talked about, which is when you're looking at how different people evolve, a lot of times when they're arguing over issues, really it's the belief systems underlying those issues that they're arguing about. And so you won't find any kind of parity on the issues unless you can unpack where each side is coming from. And very often both sides have some validity and some things that are pathological, and those pathologies rub into each other. And both sides right now are in this polarization field where everybody is very polarized. So that even the people who are supposed to be pluralistic and embracing of everyone often are actually very polarized in their social media. So they're stoking the fires and preaching to the choir rather than trying to soften the divisions between people and find common ground.
So what should our approach be? Like, let me, how can I approach this from, like, even whether I'm writing an article or making a movie or even writing a post? Like, where do I start to approach this if my desire really is, if my desire is genuinely not to be right, and most of the time, most people's desire is just to be right, I think, but let's just hold that my desire is to go, gosh, I really want to bring people together and like not have this such a angry dialogue. Like, where's the starting point? Maybe Mark, Allan, if you want to help us start, where do we start from that?
Okay. Well, as as Anita is correct,
Yeah.
said, what they're doing is part of the transformation that is being called us into by what's going on. So if we look at what's going on as we're in this major evolutionary transition, and all of the problems we're seeing is calling on us in a way that's kind of like collector exposure therapy to help us kind of evolve to this next stage. And what we're being called on to do because of all this, because the old systems are falling apart, our old way of making sense is falling apart. See, we're in a civilization-wide paradigm shift. So the old paradigms are collapsing, and this is natural. So we have to discover a new way to make sense of things because we no longer have a centralized source of information that we can put our faith into. So you got to do it both individually and collectively, like you guys are doing beautifully. And there's a lot of collectives now exploring this across the planet. So it's really cool what's going on in terms of that. And so we have to kind of, each of us now has to become kind of our whole, a sense-making system, be much more aware of, it's basically a real simple thing to understand is to check in with 4 domains: self, the information itself, the source of the information, and the collective interpretations. You want to be able to touch in on all of those to understand what's going on around anything you're about to share. And you could do it really quickly if it's like, if beforehand you start working on what are my biases, you know, what are my frames? And when you're looking at a source of information, recognizing that any information that is sent out, has been framed. There's things outside of that frame that are not in there. It's like if you're a filmmaker, how you frame a shot, there's stuff in the frame, but what's outside of the frame is just as important. And when a story is told, it's rarely told from all angles and the whole story. So you got to recognize that that source, it has these limits. And a lot of those limits come from the source of that information. So you look at, like Anita's group is doing, you look at who the source is, what their biases are, what their frames are. Right? But then you also want to do the collective thing of go outside of your reality bubble and see what they're saying. If you're on the right, you go to see what they're doing on the left and the center. If you're on the, so it's like, as they're doing, and this is what we need to be doing. But we need to be doing it individually and collectively, because what's going on is so complex that one person alone cannot make sense of it all.
Right.
And actually, the kind of sense making that this next stage of development we're trying to shift towards is more decentralized, collective intelligence oriented. So actually what's going on is helping us to evolve towards a more collective intelligence framework.
So,
and a lot of this stuff is our shadow that we
Right.
have to face.
well, that's what I was just going to ask Mark DiNicola, because, you know, I don't know, I can't pinpoint a time frame, but it feels like to me in the last maybe 6 years that Facebook sort of shifted from like a place where I shared pictures of my cute kids and kitties to, you know, like angry and fear. And somebody said to me that part of it is because, you know, of the way in which the algorithm of social media works, that it drives those types of posts forward. Is that how it works? How does it work?
A big way that it works, and a reason why the shift, 6 years is actually pretty accurate timing of when it really started to kick in, and it's changed even more since, is ever since Facebook became more for profit than it had before. And as some of the most like recent, that the really popular film that's out right now, The Social Dilemma, it's on Netflix, a lot of people talked about it. I didn't necessarily love it, but there were certain things that it illustrated really well and really brought our attention to. And the main thing that it pointed out is that we as users of Facebook are what they are selling. And the only way that they sell us is through our attention. So everything that you're seeing in the news feed is whatever is keeping you on the platform. That is the utmost importance to the platform. So Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever social media platform you're on, more than anything wants to keep you on the platform. So it doesn't matter whether the post is far right wing, far left, really outrageous, or really sweet, or whatever the case may be. It's going to serve it in more people's news feeds if it's keeping the people that have seen it so far, and it's proving algorithmically that it's keeping people engaged on the platform. It's getting them to exhibit certain behaviors. It's making them take certain actions that they want, so that they have a more positive analytical metric to present to any advertisers to suggest, hey, we got these people who spend this much time during this time frame from this age group on social at this point. So that's the most important thing to realize, that everything is being sold off of capturing our attention. Now, in the last couple of years, ever since the whole last political election scandal that kind of started to be revealed as true and known factually, is like, oh, Facebook at least started to get caught a little bit red-handed, in the sense of like, you know what, maybe we do take a little bit too much from advertisers without vetting things a little bit more than we possibly should. Ever since that point, Facebook publicly has been making this whole adamant statement, and even at public pressers with Mark Zuckerberg saying, we're going back to our roots. We're about making this about seeing your friends' posts in the feed and seeing your family members' updates and the picture of your dogs and all that stuff like that. They made this whole proclamation, and the algorithm has changed from a personal perspective. So if you as a user are sharing things, you're going to see a little bit more than you saw before that in your feed of your aunt's pictures and your best friend's wedding photos, or whatever the heck is going out there that's more like lovey-dovey safe out there, that is more connected to the original roots of what Facebook was about, which was a social network. But that's still very, very small increments. It's this whole facade that it was a massive change, but more than anything, and even more so on an annual, even monthly basis, Facebook bombards us, and not just Facebook, but all social media bombards us with advertisements more than anything else. And if you actually looked at the back end statistics and analytics behind how much we are fed for the purpose of ultimately getting us to take a certain action. So even the posts that you're seeing, let's say 1 in every 3 posts of your feed is an ad, the 1 or 2 you're seeing before that are usually teeing you up for that ad in some capacity. So if they know that you need to get really, you know, hungry before you see this ad for the local restaurant, they're going to show that picture that generated from a whole bunch of people's feed, like your friend Susie's post of her making burgers one night that she posted even 7 days ago, that got a lot of people to heart and react and yum and all these different things that algorithmically are coded because they've kind of come to understand our behavior to tee up that point. So when you see that ad, you're more likely to react to it favorably. So everything, even the family member and the friend posts, is calculated. I mean, it's not an exact science. They're still working on it, and every minute that we use it.
You're right. I didn't know about that little. I forgot about that little piece, and now that I'm thinking about it, wow, it's almost like you're not thinking on your own anymore. Like, it's just like you really are, you know, letting the machine think for you. And part of what I think we're talking about when we talk about becoming a media shaman is you know, that taking that moment, just that moment before you hit share. You know, even for me now, when I'm going to write an article, I found myself going, okay, like there's 2 things. One, there's a great quote at the beginning of The Social Dilemma that says, if the product is free, you are the product, which is 100% true. And then the second one is sort of like, you know, now when I write, I think it's Hemingway who says, write drunk, edit sober. And so I've really taken that to heart in the sense that I'm like, if I write something, like I've gotten into this wait 24 hours game, just write it, sit with it and wait. And that was so hard for me to do in the beginning because I wanted it to be out there and I wanted to see the likes and I wanted to, you know, and that's, I think that's a piece of what artists and creatives have to take back. We have to, you know, it's easier if you're making a film to do that because you got to take the time. But even in this space where you can make a video on your phone and post it in 2 hours, and you know, I think we need to take that piece back. I mean, what do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, I do think social media incentivizes the velocity of information. And it's hard to know how much control they have. There's a lot of claims, which is obviously claims they want to make for advertisers. We can control people and encourage them to buy. And a lot of that, I think, is sort of more pseudoscience than real science. But it does allow groups of people to find one another, which is the great power. It means that transgender kids can find one another, gay kids can find one another. But it also means that neo-Nazis can find one another and white supremacists can find one another. And the social media networks don't have any, they don't care which group that is as long as they're spending time on the network. So they're going to incentivize more time spent on the network. And I think they also tend to incentivize conflict because you want to get a lot of likes. And a lot of times if you're speaking to your own echo chamber, you're going to get likes for things that are hostile to the people outside your echo chamber. So in that sense, I think it also does tend to incentivize division in many cases, while also doing a lot of great things. I mean, they're both true in a way.
Yeah, but so as a media shaman, like, you know, a part of my toolkit probably needs to be slow down, you know, and breathe and check in before I go to the next step of really, you know, determining, well, what is, to me, I think part about being a media shaman is, well, what's my intention? What is it that I want the outcome? What is it that I want the outcome to be? And checking in with that. You know, if my desire is to make you mad and I'm okay with that, then okay, then that's what my intention is. But sometimes I think we aren't even aware of what our intentions are. And does that play a role in how well your media or your content is received?
Is that addressed to me or?
It can be, yeah. You or Mark, whichever one.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you guys are the media shaman experts, so.
Well, Mark is the real expert. I'll give him the credit for that. But one of the things we talk about in the Media Shaman Toolkit is also knowing about the structures of consciousness, the evolutionary stages that we go through as individuals, as cultures, as societies and technologies. Because when you're posting something, it helps to be able to know what you're responding to and what's the evolutionary structure of the people who you're responding to and trying to reach. Because if you respond in the wrong way, you can actually increase division, even if you're trying to bridge the gap. So really understanding these different things and understanding your own perceptual operating system helps you evolve your own perceptual operating system.
I wanted to say this. We have some people having a great time in the chat too, and they're loving what you guys are saying. They haven't asked any specific questions, but they've made a lot of interesting comments. So I just want to acknowledge them for paying attention and having some fun in there. I love the conversation that you guys are having. And if you guys have a question, just ask it and I'll try to scan through it and get to it. I know this is part of what the course is about, which you can find a link for, I believe, in the chat and on our website. But without, because I know this is a big conversation, can you just give us a short description of like where we are, Mark, Allan, Kaplan, like consciously, and like where we're going to go, or like a quick, these are the 5, here's where we are and here's where we're moving to, can you do that? Sure. In like a minute?
The big picture, Mark, you have 30 seconds.
The big picture, Mark, do it in 30. I think this would be great for like the people like Anahita too, because once you hear this, Anahita, your head's going to explode. Because the first time I heard it, I was like, wow, this makes such sense. So it's really powerful because what Jonathan said is really true. And I so understand it now, Mark, that you have to know, like, what was it, Logan's Run, where everybody had the same colors? Or was it that movie? Remember where they all had the little lights and they were this color and that color? And if you tried to talk to somebody in a different color, like you couldn't be heard because you didn't have the right language skills. What Mark is going to share with us really makes sense because it helps you understand how to communicate with people who are at different levels of consciousness. Right, Mark? Is that kind of it?
Yes,
yeah.
Basically that's, yes. So we all, if we're parents, we know that children evolve through different stages of development. What we don't realize often is that those stages continue all the way through adulthood. If we don't have, if we don't stop and block ourselves in, and often we do. And we evolve through these different stages, and we have multiple lines of development, evolving at different stages. But there's kind of like central kind of things, like so the cognitive line of development and how we perceive. And our worldview is kind of an essential one. And this is kind of the major one we talk about because it's the easiest one to work with. And the worldview line is very much like we could see it right now in our political situation where you have what we could call a kind of civil war between three structures of consciousness. And that is between what we would commonly call the traditional worldview, the modern or rational worldview, and the postmodern or pluralistic worldview. And these are very different. The centrist worldview tends to be that modern, rational, logical worldview. The traditional is more mythic and magical. It's more tribal, us versus them. Things are black and white. There's a whole different perceptual field there. And then when you go to the postmodern, the pluralistic, it's more, the truth is relative. And an understanding that subjective reality is important. So, but these worldviews are in direct conflict with each other right now. But also how you communicate across those fields, we're often projecting onto each other without realizing that we're at just different stages of development and we're perceiving a situation from a whole different worldview. And the problem is right now is that, besides individuals, we collectively evolve through these stages. And they're reflected in our technologies. So for example, the internet is a pluralistic postmodern technology. And when we use technologies from a certain structure of consciousness, they actually lay down neural pathways in our brains to help us have that kind of consciousness. So it's actually, so what we have now, really quick, I can, is we are in this major transition at a scale that humanity has never seen before. The closest we've got was the Industrial Revolution. And that was a shift from one stage, the traditional feudal civilization, to the next stage, which was the rational industrial nation state system. And our transition now, since we have technologies that are way past even postmodern, we've got metamodern and transmodern tech coming online. But our political power structures, let's put it this way, the furthest edge of our technologies and the lowest edge of the percentage of population in power is 4 to 5 stages apart. And we've never had that before because technology has accelerated so fast, but our evolution of consciousness hasn't kept up. And all the problems we're seeing is because of this gap. As Einstein said, we can't solve a problem from the consciousness that created it. And so we're in a really tough situation here, and we're being called to shift out of this kind of nation-centric, modern social structures that we still have, and kind of make the shift into a more pluralistic field. So it's like right now, we have the internet, which is a pluralistic technology. We have our smartphones, which is a meta-modern integral technology. And we have AI and all this other stuff coming online, which is transmodern. But our social systems are still at modern.
Right.
And the tension is all over the place. But here's one last key. What we're talking about with social media, and what Mark was saying, what that does is it created a fertile ground for mythic traditional structures to use a higher technology to express themselves. And so all of the world's major kind of traumatic collective events have happened because higher stage tech got in the hands of lower stages of consciousness.
Wow.
So yes, social media has this major flaw of the algorithm and how it's oriented towards that thing. But there's forces out there that have learned how to hack that for the purposes of division. So we find ourselves, actually, there are military strategists around the world who actually believe we're in the middle of World War III, but we don't realize it. And that it's what they're calling nonlinear warfare. Mm-hmm. That social media and propaganda techniques are being combined with big data and AI to basically take society and break it apart, to pit everyone against each other. So there's this basically happening. This is one level of the big picture. Mm-hmm. So what we are called to do is try to transcend the polarization field that's being heightened.
Yeah, say created or heightened, yeah.
Now these separations were there before, but yeah. But there are certain groups or religions that are trying to heighten that.
Right.
And,
well,
and that's our job as media shamans to counter that.
Well, that's why what the work that Anahita does and what Mark does is yes. so important and so valuable, because I think I've always found Mark to be, he has some crazy views, that guy, but he's I'm just teasing Mark, but Mark, you always seem to be in a very grounded space when you talk about, whatever you're putting on social. And same with you, Anahita. One of the things that you said, which reminded me of what Mark Allan is saying, is that, you said, we create a safe space and we understand people's trauma. And I think a big part of our trauma in this moment is that our world as we know it is being completely ripped out from underneath us. And so we're just grabbing. And I do see that the work that you're doing sort of creates a little landing pad so that we don't feel like we're unknown. How do you feel like sort of meeting people where they're at, Anahita? How is that working for you? What do you feel like is happening with your groups and what you're up to because of taking that approach?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the very definition of trauma is loss of control, essentially. And when we have a loss of control, you know, our nervous systems are designed to kick into a fight and flight system. And when we can't use it, we can't fight something's happening that we can't fight or flight from, that is the clinical definition of trauma, inability to fight or flight. So looking at our current world, with pandemic happening, with lockdowns, with economic challenges, political challenges, with environmental challenges, it just feels like everything's catapulting at the same time. And there's a strong sense of loss of control for mass populations. Pretty much everyone's experiencing that. Now we have ways of regulating our nervous systems to find our grounding, and some do this more effectively than others, mainly because either they have access or practices, the privilege to access those practices, or have an upbringing that allows for a little bit more resilience. But for mass numbers of people, this is a deeply traumatizing experience. And when we're in that space, we actually don't have access to our cognitive capacity. The parts of our brain that help us make rational, logical decisions are not online. So, you know, no matter how much, when somebody's really scared and terrified, we try to reason with them, the reason doesn't actually work. So our first goal is going to have to be to seek to create a safe landing space, essentially validating the emotion, not the narrative. I think that's really important, because a lot of individuals go towards these narratives that are being shown to them in these really manipulative ways because they care, because there's an emotion within them that gets activated. And so our best chance is to really connect at that emotional level and validate that emotion and say, yes, we recognize your kindness, your compassion, your concern. And here is some beautiful way to redirect it. I think the best we can do is redirect that care, that compassion towards something more tangible that's really happening in the world. And allowing individuals, giving them a tool to do something about it. I think that's the other piece. When we feel hopeless, can't do anything about it, we feel really triggered, and then it really shows up in form of overwhelm or conflict. And I think our work right now is about finding that common ground where we can not necessarily agree on topics, but find a place that we can at least agree on facts and just agree that this is our factual reality. And that's the goal. That's all we're trying to do right now, is not to sway anyone's opinion, but to be able to validate the emotion and really acknowledge that, because that's really core principles of nonviolent communication. People get worked up when they don't feel heard. And in order to hear them, you don't have to hear their story and validate the story, but rather hear the emotion and validate the human emotion. And I think that's the best chance that we've got right now. It's a long-term strategy, but it is what it is right now. I feel like that's where we're at.
Well, I see it working in your group really well. We did get there's a wonderful, we got to go back later if you can. I hope it doesn't disappear and read the chat. They're all commenting on what you're saying, but I finally found a question in there that I could get into. And Mark Nicola, this one's you start with this. And Jonathan, I'm curious to know what your perspective on this might be from the sort of what you and Mark work on. Is social media? Did social media really amplify or exacerbate this situation? I mean, would this, if say we didn't have the social media the way it was, say Facebook had always stayed this normal cat place to post your cat videos, and clinic, what is that, the great hack people, Cambridge Analytica hadn't shown up and done what they did, do you think we'd still be here? I mean, was social media always going to go this way, do you think?
I personally believe that social media has fueled certain behaviors that has made this gain more fire behind it than it probably actually would have. But I think that inevitably there still would be really strong reactions regardless of what's going on. Like Mark Allan said, we're at this major crux where so much is collapsing simultaneously. And as Anahita said as well, it's just so much is collapsing that it's really in our face. It's unavoidable. And I think that's kind of the beauty from my perspective of everything that's going on, is that as scary as everything is, to me, it still feels necessary, because what was even scarier was staying the status quo, where all of us were so busy consistently and scrolling through these feeds consistently that we were never going to do anything. So you needed this chaos. You needed this thing to just shake things up and to give us this opportunity to rechange things, to reshape the way we share everything. So I think that there's kind of like a natural beauty behind everything that's going on. And it's important that we do things like Anahita said, where we all kind of see that there is a common goal, even though it seems like we're coming from different perspectives. I think even when you look at what's going on now, whether you believe climate change is a hoax, or you think that climate change is the biggest problem in the world, or you think Donald Trump's a moron, or you think Donald Trump's a hero, or whether you think that, you know, your health everyone needs to be locked up and wearing masks, or everyone needs to do the opposite, everyone ultimately wants the same thing. They all want everyone to be healthy. They all want everyone to have a place where it's fair. It's a beautiful society for everyone to coexist politically. And they all want the world to thrive and Mother Earth to thrive. They all just have different ways and different things that they think are the triggers to getting to that point. If we can instead, as Anahita said, connect at that emotional level and recognize that we all have that same core intention, then we can use social media completely differently. Because we start to respect other people's views and opinions and be open-minded to it, rather than try to use it to quickly react and quickly push a certain thing because only my way is right, and the people who agree with me are the only ones that are worth listening to, and everyone else needs to shut up or I'm going to fight with them. And it's this whole us versus them, even though everyone ultimately wants to get to the same place. They just have different ways of getting there.
Excellent. Jonathan, so we know meeting kind of, I'm gonna paraphrase it to sort of meeting people where they're at, right? Creating, allowing, we also heard sort of like, you know, validating their feelings, maybe not necessarily their narrative. So what are some other like tips and tools that people could take away just from tonight if they, you know, if you guys want to, by the way, there is a media shaman course. It's a video course. It's 3 3-hour segments, right?
They're different lengths.
Oh, okay.
The first one's an hour and a half. I think the second one's 2.5 hours, a big download. And the third one is an hour and 15.
Right. And it's available. If you're a member of the Creators Network, it's one price. And if you're not, it's a different price. There's a link. Chris has been putting it in the chat, so you can find it there. It'll also be on our platform. And it's really, I think every human being should take this course. Personally, I think we all need to take this course, because you're going to learn. I've always been learning so much from Mark that has helped me just be better at existing, like understanding the realities and what's going on, and then being able to be better at communicating that in a way that's impactful. So what might be like another little good tip for people watching tonight? We've got, you know, the first two that I just mentioned. What's one more little thing that we could think about when we're out there creating?
Well, one point that Mark, my colleague Mark, was talking about, how we go through these stages from the traditional. But one important point is that as you evolve from one stage to the next, you don't get rid of the previous stage, you actually transcend and include it. So it's important to understand that. So we all have mythic elements in us. And there are aspects of the traditional that are valuable. Family values has now become this sort of code word for evangelical Christianity. And so now people on the left don't like the term, even though family values are important, but we just want to include it to include different types of families. It doesn't only have to be a traditional family. But a lot of the values, loyalty, duty, honor, are still important values. They just can become pathological if you privilege them over other rational and objective values when you move to the objective and rational modern. And when you go to the postmodern, you begin to realize that all truth is relative, but that doesn't mean you get rid of objective truth and get rid of science. You still embrace science. You just realize there can be a higher perspective in which you have to put it in its proper place. And the other point to note is that each of these stages can tend to become pathological as they're transitioning to the next stage. They hold on. Mm-hmm. So right now we have most of our social systems, like the government systems, are all rational structure. They're like, everything is laws and it's if A, then B. But that can become pathological if you try to apply it to every domain of civilization, which our government often does. doesn't mean you don't want to doesn't mean you want to get rid of all laws and objective truth. It just means that you can understand that every structure can become pathological. And what Mark didn't mention is that right now we have the pre-modern, the modern, and the postmodern, and all three of them are pathological as they try to transition to the next stage. And we have technologies that are a stage or two past those that are pulling us in those directions and being weaponized by each of the three stages. So it's a very complicated situation.
Here's a question for you, Jonathan, that someone just posed, and I'm curious to, and I'm going to paraphrase it because they're having a discussion about facts, right? And Anna, he just talked about, you know, facts, and the discussion over there is, well, what's a fact anymore? So is the definition of fact changing?
I don't think the definition of fact is changing, but I think a lot of people have begun to understand that much of what we think of as factual is actually just expert opinion that we have chosen to trust. So we pick a set of experts. So for climate change, for medical things, we have a set of experts that we choose to believe, but that doesn't mean they're correct. And people are finding out that a lot of expertise is actually maybe not correct. In 100 years, a lot of what we thought was true might turn out to have been completely false. People are having that now with the issue of fat. Is fat bad for you? Right. Is whatever. And we also know that large industries have spent a lot of money on disinformation, polluting our networks, most large industries in the US and elsewhere. So people are starting to realize that what we thought of as facts might not be facts. That doesn't mean that facts don't also exist, that objective truth doesn't exist, just that many of the things that we think, oh, this is objectively true, maybe not.
Mark Allan, go ahead, you want to say something?
Another thing to remember here is that each stage of development perceives truth in its own way. So someone at the traditional structure who's operating with the traditional structure, center of gravity, we call it, they believe in absolute truth, that there is an absolute truth out there that can be found. And often they believe that their faith or their tradition has found that truth, and every other truth is not true. You know, there's no other truth but that. That's a form of truth. So how we perceive what's out there is filtered through our structure of consciousness. And so for the rational stage, for the modern, it's objective truth is the only truth. And they deny the existence of consciousness or a subjective experience because it's not objective enough for that hardcore. And for the postmodern, it's truth is relative. Okay, so my truth is just as important as your truth. You know, but a higher dimension of that is what Anita's talking about, in that the fundamental thing here is the feeling under those things, under those truth frames, we call them, is what has to be like spoken to. But also what we want to be able to do is to head into the meta-modern form of truth for the media shaman to understand, and that is recognizing the different stages and the type of truth that they're perceiving. And so truth then becomes qualified by the stage of development or the structure of consciousness. And so then we could recognize what's underpinning them. And we could speak to them and understand that all of them actually have some value. There is a place for objective truth. There's a place for relative truth. There's a place, they all have value. It's just when they are used as the only frame for every domain is when we get a problem. You know, as physicist David Bohm talked about, is that every level of reality has its own paradigm, its own truth field. So Newtonian physics is profoundly true at the level of form. But when you try to apply Newtonian theory at the quantum level, it doesn't work at all. There's a whole different set of truths going on there.
Right.
That doesn't mean that Newtonian truth is false. It means it's only true for one domain. So we have to recognize that and work with the different domain fields and the different truth fields and get to what's behind that.
I so appreciate that. We're going to have to wrap it up in a minute. I'm going to give you two interesting fun facts. One, it was Fritjof Capra who said, "Science evolves one funeral at a time," which I thought was a great quote, because what, you know, basically I have a lot of friends who are skeptics and they're very science-based. And I love science. I think science helped my two children survive birth. Science, you know, is amazing, and medicine is amazing. But I can also hold the space that, you know, sometimes science gets it wrong, and science only knows what science knows right now. And if you ever spend enough time with a true researcher or scientist, they rarely use the word, "this is a fact." They most often will say, "This is what we know to be true now." Because if they said, and one scientist explained this to me, he said, if I said this is a fact, then why would I bother trying to explore anything further on it? What's the point? If it's a fact and it's done, then it's boring. But this is what we know right now. And the last, this is a piece of information that's interesting. What the Bleep Do We Know opened in theaters on February 4th, 2004, which is the very same day that Facebook launched. And I think that's very interesting. If you think about those two things happening on the same day, it just is pretty interesting. So I'm gonna
this is your responsibility.
I'm just saying, I thought that was weird that we had this whole movie about quantum physics and the nature of reality and what you think, and then here we are with Facebook, which basically now tells us what to think and what our reality is. So we're gonna wrap it up here, but I'm gonna go through Anahita. How can people find out more about what you're doing? Because I have a feeling, I know Sanity Sanctuary is kind of a private group. I mean, you have to be let in and it's a whole thing and you're very careful about that, unless you want to now open it up. I don't know. But well, how can people find you and find what you're doing? Because I love that you're out there in it, doing and putting into practice what Mark and Jonathan and Mark are really trying to talk about. So how can people help you? How can people support you? Any last thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. Sanity Sanctuary is private, but it is open to people who would like to submit their questions and go through the process and join us. We welcome everyone from all walks of life.
And that's on Facebook, right?
Yeah. Yes. And then Project One Voice, you can go to projectonevoice.org to read more about us. All of our work right now, we just launched like 3 weeks ago with content. So all of our work right now is on social media, and it's based on social media campaigns. We'll love your support. Join us. Text One Voice to 33222, and you'll be part of our campaign. You'll learn more about us, and we'd love to have you and your feedback and expertise. Anyone that would like to contribute. This is a collaborative endeavor with a lot of volunteers that are just showing up, have a voice, and we give them a platform.
Awesome work. Mark D. Nicola, is this the end of social media as we know it?
I think that social media will continue to evolve. I think this is a great awakening in social media. The fact that something so catastrophic is happening is making us realize how addicted we are and how unconsciously we're consuming it. That I have faith in humanity that will use it for the better and more frequently for the better, I'll say, moving forward. So I think it's an exciting time. Ultimately, It might take a while to get there.
Right. Jonathan, there was a question about the course on the platform, so I'm going to let you answer it, and I'm going to go find it. Excuse me. They're having so much fun over here. You guys are doing so great. They love you. They love what you do. Okay, somebody wanted to know is, I'm pretty sure I know what it was. In the course, do you talk about how to understand propaganda and the information is how it's being morphed, or like, can you help people learn how to discern a little more?
Yes, actually part one is developed as sense making in a post-truth age. So it's all about figuring out what the truth patterns are. Mark was talking about how there are these different truth patterns and how they're reflected in different propaganda. And then part 2 is 10 keys to transformative media. That's 10 ways that if you're making media or if you're just even watching media, you can see when it's doing things that are transformational and how you can increase the ability to reach out to people who aren't like you and transform people across all different domains and communicate across multiple domains. And then part 3 is for guerrilla media making. That's for in case you have your smartphone and you're out at a protest or you're called to document something, how you can do it without getting into the field that's there, stepping outside of it and just documenting it in the most neutral way and the way sort of brings the most truth to it. So it's a 3-part course in that sense.
I think this should be mandatory viewing for every human. If we're gonna be out in the world and we're gonna be passing along information and we're going to be, you know, everybody's now a filmmaker and a documentary filmmaker, they say, you know, everyone. I mean, it used to be that people thought I had a craft and a skill. Now apparently everyone is, which is fine. But I think that the distinctions that we've been talking about tonight and the distinctions that you talk about in this course are going to transform. If more people start to understand this, I think you're right, Mark Nicole, social media will totally transform because of this kind of awareness. And Anahita, you're already on it and you're already down the road, which I think is amazing. And thank you all for everything that you are up to. If you want to get the course, you can go to, I think, CGood TV. And then right now, by the way, if you're new to the platform, we had a lot of people, you've signed up because you had to sign up to get into this course. But if you know people that are interested in this kind of media, the sign up right now is free. You just put your email in and then you can, the course is not free, but all of our other content right now is. Later on this month, we are going to have a very special event called Bridging the Divide, where we're going to be screening films that their purpose is about bringing people together, about how we come together as a species, as a community. Again, we have free trip to Egypt. We have a film called Divided We Fall. We have a special live event screening of a film called Purple and another film called Reunited States. And we're going to have a panel discussion, and that's later in the month, and you can learn more about that on our platform as well. You guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And to you, everybody out there, become a media shaman. The world needs you. We need you. So thank you.